All right, let's wrap it up with the Seattle Seahawks. Then we'll get into prediction time for the NFC West. Seahawks, Geno Smith back again at the helm, and a team that rejuvenated Geno Smith a couple years ago, and made them a playoff team and a fringe playoff team over these last couple of years. I'm real interested to see what happens on the defensive side of the ball for the Seahawks. Mike Macdonald's coming in, Pete Carroll stepping away after a great run in Seattle, but this defensive front hasn't been what it was early in Pete Carroll's tenure. Feel like I've been waiting for that to get back, and I think this is the best defensive line they've had in a while. And then McDonald's coming in, bringing that Ravens defense with him, and some of their ability to disguise pressure. I'm real intrigued by Seattle this year and how quickly they hit the ground running on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, generally, I'm not an advocate for, and in fact, I rail against this idea of getting bored of a good coach. And, you've not won anything. You haven't won a championship in a long time. It's time to get rid of you, even though you're consistently good year in, year out. And I sort of feel for Pete Carroll because ultimately, he was kind of made a scapegoat, and it was sort of suggested to him seemingly that, hey, Pete, it's time that we mutually parted ways, by which I mean you need to leave, so you need to agree to mutually leave because we're done with you now. That appears to be basically the dynamic that happened there in Seattle. And that's unfortunate because Pete Carroll has been a legend for this team, did incredible things, built incredible things, did win, and they've been good every year. But I do feel very excited about what the new regime is. The fact that they have gone from Pete Carroll to now bringing in Macdonald, bringing in that defensive scheme, that new way of doing things, what that can do for the personnel that they have. And you start looking at this roster, and top to bottom now, it looks really good. Like, they're one of the teams where when you start pulling up the depth charts and you start going down the personnel, I'm surprising myself by just how good this team is top to bottom, and getting progressively more excited as we get towards the season of what the Seahawks could actually do this year.
Then you throw in the fact that I saw them in person at joint practices, and
right.
You got to overreact to what you saw in person. That defense was really good when I was watching. Red zone day, man, they were locked down in the red zone against the Titans in their joint practices. The other guy, Reek Woolen, in person, Sam. You can't see it on film. You weren't there. But in person, the 6'4" frame and the way he moves and the physicality, it is legit. And so, look, I'm only joking about the in-person stuff a little bit, but Woolen and Witherspoon as a 1-2 punch in the secondary. We all love Devin Witherspoon as a player, and then you think about how Mike Macdonald used a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who's a safety by name, but became his do-everything slot, move-around type of player. Witherspoon's a different position by name. He's an outside corner who has a similar skill set, right? He's going to stick his nose in there against the run, and he's going to tackle, play man-to-man, play zone, can do it all. So a lot of good pieces here for the Seattle Seahawks.
There really are. Earlier in the offseason, you like the roster top to bottom, but the one area, the Achilles heel, was like the interior of that offensive line. And you looked at that and you said, man, the whole thing could unspool there, right? No names, a guard, no center to speak of. Like, this could be a real problem. We were saying they needed to draft an offensive lineman in the first round just to plug somebody into that gap. And yet that's not what the Seahawks do from a personnel standpoint. They don't think interior offensive linemen essentially are worth first-round picks. And they had the patience. They went in a different direction. And they end up getting a guy in Christian Haynes, much lower down the draft, who could easily come in and start quickly. And then they come back later on in the sort of post-draft, free agent landscape and get Connor Williams. And okay, Connor Williams is coming off a torn ACL. We don't know if he's going to be 100%, but Connor Williams has been one of the better centers in the league in the last couple of years. So almost immediately, that offensive line starts to take on a completely different complexion, added to the talent that they have out wide, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, the talent is there for this group to be really good on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, there's still some what-ifs up there for the offensive line. I agree with everything you said. I love the way they played the draft and got Haynes in the third round because it allowed them to get Byron Murphy in the first round, who already looks like he has a chance to be a 3-down game changer at a defensive tackle position where the market is just through the roof. So Murphy becomes just really good value at pick 16 where they were. So let's talk about the offense really quick here. Offensively, the two tackles, Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, really nice rookie seasons in 2022. Some injury issues last year. If they're back healthy, Connor Williams, who you mentioned, Christian Haynes, I presume steps in a little bit. They've got to creep back toward average or better potential on the offensive line. They need some of those what ifs to come good there. And then I look at Geno Smith throwing to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, just one of the more consistent 1-2 punches in the league the last 5 or 6 years. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba added to that group, or a Jake Bobo added to that group. Bobo continues to defy the odds as a playmaker. Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown at tight end. It's a good group of playmakers, Sam. I think JSN has a chance to maybe this is the year where he starts to cut into Tyler Lockett's production, cut into his playing time, and give them that, that replacement option as Lockett gets a little bit older here.
And the backfield as well. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, that's a phenomenal 1-2 punch. Like, this team absolutely has talent.
Defensively, again, I think it's the best defensive line since the Legion of Boom years. It's, add Murphy in the first round. They spent a second rounder on Leonard Williams, and you could raise the question: is that worth it? A second round pick for Leonard Williams. Is Williams one of the biggest impact defensive linemen in the league? I don't. He's in the top 15 or so, I would say. He just brings an incredible durability. You're going to get 800 to 900 snaps out of him every year. He's a solid run defender, play up and down the defensive line, multi-gaps. I think you know what you're going to get from Leonard Williams. So they're paying for that certainty. You pair him with Byron Murphy. Jonathan Hankins comes in as just an absolute monster at nose tackle. They had a lot of success in Dallas against the run when he was out there. So an intriguing group of interior players. And then, the seemingly annual stream of second-round edge rushers, Boye Mafe and Derek Hall and Darrell Taylor. I mean, they should have enough juice off the edge. I think when you put it all together, it's a really good defensive front for the Seahawks here.
Well, just like everybody along that front takes on a different. You have to sort of view them through a different lens now that we're bringing in this Baltimore Ravens defense. They are going to be more multiple. They're going to move around a lot more. They're going to confuse teams because of the way that defense creates pressure. So everybody that we're looking at, you have to start thinking about in a slightly different light. Are we going to get a different version of Leonard Williams where that versatility really comes into its own and becomes a real positive for them? Byron Murphy, rather. This is a guy who's a 3-tech body playing nose tackle effectively for Texas, right? Same idea. Is he going to be able to move all around this defensive front? Are we going to get breakout years from Boye Mafe or Uchenna Nwosu on the edge or, some of those guys? So there's a lot of intriguing players, guys to be optimistic about in a vacuum. But then when you couple it with the defense that's coming over, I think there's reasons to be very excited by what this defensive line could be.
Yeah, and then you pair that with what I said in the secondary. I'm excited about Devin Witherspoon in year 2 for him. With, Reek Woolen was the kind of the epitome of the cornerback fluctuation, right? Had all those interceptions as a rookie. Still has his ups and downs in coverage, but he was supposed to be a project, right? He was supposed to be this former wide receiver who was not a very good football player at UTSA, and then had one of the best combines of all time. No exaggeration, 6'4", runs in the 4.2s, change of direction's great, length is great. It was supposed to take him some time, and he looked good as a rookie. But he was supposed to be starting to become good now. And again, it's one in person, Sam, against the Titans, but it looks like he might be taking his game to the next level. He has a chance to be special. I'll just say this. He has a chance to be special any given year with that type of skill set.
I mean, look, Richard Sherman pulled up a single play from him against Calvin Ridley in the preseason, right? And Calvin Ridley is one of the best route runners in the NFL, who understands, subtle movements, how to set up defensive backs. And it was just this great rep of Reek Woolen shadowing him down the field, not panicking when he gave up position right off the line, staying sort of slightly behind, just not quite in trail position, but not quite in phase either. Just being patient, right? And understanding that with his speed, his makeup speed and his wingspan, just the target area that he presents, he has so much more room for error. He can let Calvin Ridley get a hair ahead of him without panicking, doesn't have to like overextend to get back in phase and give up a comeback route, give up an underneath break. He can just be patient and essentially eliminate any window that the quarterback has to work from. It was just a great rep against a really high level route runner, and perfectly shows like what that skill set, what his physical traits allow him to do in any given play. And yeah, it's one rep, it's one day of in practice, but like this is why this guy has off the charts potential.
Just want to add a friend of the show, Julian Love, to the mix as well. Another guy that played corner in college and has moved around as a safety and as a nickel in the NFL. So I think the more versatile pieces you're giving Mike Macdonald on the defensive side, the better. And so many of the players in Seattle secondary have the ability to play inside, play outside, play safety. So I'm intrigued by it, man. Best case scenario for Seattle. What do you think they can do here?
So best case scenario, I actually think the Seahawks are like a surprise contender. Not just, contender for postseason, but like a real contender. That roster is crazy good. The talent is there. Like I actually think I'm already saying that the Cardinals could be a surprise team and shock people. I think the Seahawks could as well. That team could really be legit if those things come together.
Check the mic, Sam, is so positive. I like it.
Just
very
NFC West, Sam.
NFC West, Sam. No, I mean, I'm with you, man. I mean, just to talk about Geno Smith for a minute here, he's been, you kind of wait for the regression too. Like we did that the first 2022, his first full year as a starter. When does he regress back into a backup? And it never really happened. I thought last year there was some ups and downs. There were times where, he wasn't great. I think he's got to get better in the red zone. He's got, the most turnover worthy plays in the red zone over the last couple of years. But Geno can make some special throws. And he's got that, I hate saying it factor, but he's got that once you start doubting him factor. Once you do start to think like I was, when does the regression happen? When does he come back down to earth? He seems to step up his game even more. He does handle adversity extremely well. I think that bodes well for Seattle. And yeah, I'm with you. That best case, maybe they sneak into the NFC Championship. I think they can I feel better about Seattle making a run this year maybe than the last couple of years, because this feels like the building blocks are being put in place. The worst case scenario, though, kind of coincides with that. It's just the unknown, I think, of the coaching switch, right? It's Mike Macdonald coming in. If you remember Macdonald's system with Baltimore, a bunch of busted coverages those first few weeks. Like it took them a little bit to get going. I don't know if that's going to be a feature of this defense again, but that's probably part of the worst case scenario. Is maybe the personnel looks good on paper, but it's not a great fit for Macdonald. Maybe we're overrating the fit, and maybe my Geno doubting comes true here, right? It's like, oh, he does regress back, and those turnover worthy plays in the red zone get caught more often this year. I think that's all part of the potential worst case here for Seattle.
I feel like they have a pretty high floor, though, right? Like even their worst case scenario is just missing the playoffs. Like you're in the hunt until the final week of the season and you come up a game or two short. Like that's the worst case scenario for the Seahawks. Like I think they have actually one of the higher floors of any team in the league.
Position group wise, is there one you're looking at as a key position or player for the season?
I think it is that defensive line, not necessarily an area of concern, but just seeing how that group is going to be within this defense. How much can he turbocharge their success? Who's going to emerge as a surprise player that's actually way better in this system than they were in the previous one? And does it become a real strength under Mike Macdonald and his new defense?
I'm going to go back to the offensive line. I'm with you. I'll be watching the defensive line closely, but O-line wise, they're banking on Laken Tomlinson coming in. He's coming off of his two worst seasons, essentially. Really only played his best football under Kyle Shanahan with the Niners. I don't know if that's something to be concerned about if you're banking on him at left guard, and then right guard, Christian Haynes. I think, they have Anthony Bradford battling Christian Haynes probably for the right guard spot. Haynes could play left guard as well. They've moved him around, but Haynes as a player who I really liked, and to repeat from earlier, Seattle played it well, getting him in the third round, not necessarily forcing, because they didn't have a second round pick, right? And they didn't want to force a guard or a center in the first round. They get Haynes in the third. So I think, just shoring up the guard position as a whole is going to be huge for this team, keeping pressure from Geno, opening up that run game. So I'll be keeping an eye on the interior of the offensive line for the Seahawks.